in cybersecurity with Doug Hubbard. So a presentation today, there he is, hey Richard, a presentation today that we're thrilled to be able to have. It's kind of been one of the benefits, I think, of the whole pandemic and going virtual is being able to get kind of cool presenters, right? So we are the beneficiary of that. We are recording this, you may notice, and we're as a board, we're going to kind of meet after because we haven't traditionally done that to talk about kind of best ways to distribute and provide. So if you see that, FYI, so more to come there.
Go ahead and share, Grant. You should have finished them.
Maybe we're going to try to go in a slideshow and make sure I'm still presenting. Everyone see the slideshow?
Yep.
Perfect. Quick view of the board. We've got some, I don't think Chris and Za are new from the last session. I don't think they were here, but calling your attention to Mr. Burrows and Mrs. Gonzalvo. So this is your esteemed board. Again, everyone here kind of putting in their own time to make sure that we can provide good content and be of value to those of you that are attending. To that end, I did want to kind of put a question to the group where if you feel comfortable answering a couple queries we wanted to put out, throw it in the chat if you'd like. First, general thoughts for when people would be comfortable with the idea of resuming live meetings. The West Michigan chapter, as an example, is doing an event, I think in July, their CloudCon, which is an annual event that's outdoors, but live. And so would like to get a sense just of people's comfort level, because obviously we don't want to do anything that causes conflict or pushes people away from what we're trying to do. So feel free to drop a note in the chat on that, please. Second thing was one of the things that we're trying to kind of sharpen up from our chapter perspective is what are the kind of benefits of membership. Right now we do these monthly meetings. A lot, your attendance is greatly appreciated. We'd like to get your thoughts, where possible, on how being a member of the CSA Detroit chapter could be more valuable to you, how you feel it would incentivize other folks in the profession here locally to join and kind of grow the participation level we have. So any thoughts either way there would be something we'd be very grateful for. So with that, Jim, Jackery,
Jackery.
That's probably the kind of question I bet you I could have asked before I introduced you, right? Sorry about that, Jim. Want to kick it over to our sponsor for the evening. Jim, take it away. Thank you very much for sponsoring.
Absolutely. Thanks. And is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. Awesome. Well, for those I haven't met, I've actually been in this industry for more than 20 years. So I was your friendly neighborhood BlackBerry guy for 11 years. And then I did Mass 360 for another 5. And I'm now with Expel. We are a bring your own tech, SOC as a service, and managed detection and response company. Motto is to create space for the security professionals to do what they love about security, making it unexpectedly simple. So not to bury the lead, but the recent Forrester report on managed detection and response came out in Q1. And in 20 plus years of doing this, I've never been this guy all the way to the top and right. So we'll just touch a little bit today on kind of why Expel did that well and how we kind of differentiate ourselves, just so you got a sense of who we are. And again, if there's discussions after the fact, happy to meet with anyone and have those talks. So in the criteria, there are over 100 companies that submitted for the Forrester Wave. You can actually download a copy from expel.io/wave. The top 15 were evaluated, and out of 19 key criteria, Expel scored highest on 14 of those. And a lot of these are actually partners as well from a technology perspective. So how we actually go about doing this is connecting with companies' existing security stack, and that includes cloud infrastructure, SaaS applications, endpoint, on-premise, network, SIEM. We'll ingest that signal and run it through our bots. And essentially our platform is called Workbench. Our analysts will then take, the critical items that the bots have already teed up for them and then run things through to remediation and provide answers, as opposed to traditional security vendors that might take your alerts and say this is high priority and give it back to you or open a ticket. We're actually going to run all the way through to remediation. The tech that we're connecting to on-prem, again, there's over 50 different security partners, many of them on this call that we integrate with, both from on-prem and the things that we look for there. The cloud infrastructure, main 3 platforms, 66% of our customers have multi-cloud. Many are Azure, AWS, or GCP, but we support all those. In terms of applications, newer ones are GitHub, but certainly the G Suite, Office 365, and connecting especially strong in the cloud. And additionally, we'll manage your Office 365 or your Gmail phishing mailboxes as well to take some of that burden off of your security analysts. So when we take all of that signal, we're actually going from potentially millions of alerts. Bots are doing their work to do the filtering, doing the threat intel, weeding out the false positives, the white noise. So when it actually gets to a human to look at it, make judgment, they've already got the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and we'll, if needed, kick off investigations. If an incident is declared, we're 7/24 on IM via Slack or Teams or what have you to notify you right away. And again, our goal in terms of metrics, which is today's topic, is to reduce mean time to detect, mean time to remediate. And what we do with that is give you a view of everything that our analysts are doing. You could join the fight if your guys want to. If they want to work on their own, that's great. We can do it all. We can do half. And the key is being transparent. So you're seeing what we're up to. Also, you're getting visibility into what your tech stack is doing, what's driving alerts, what's driving investigations. And then again, back to the metrics, measuring how your security program is doing overall. Traditional problems that are being addressed, companies that are growing their SOC, going 7/24, analysts that are overworked, may not have expertise with cloud, especially trying to get arms around costs from multiple silos and bringing them to a single view of the security program. So you do that with triaging 7/24, providing findings and next steps, as well as remediation. We do resilience recommendations, giving you that visibility needed in the cloud, and then budget certainty around the resources that you've got. In terms of a few customers, larger ones like large automotive company, Delta Airlines, obviously some of these are very big companies. Zscaler that presented at last meetings, yes, they're both a tech partner and we operate their SOC as well. And in those cases, they want to keep planes up in the air and don't want to have to worry about, level 1, 0, 2 types of triage. So we take that off their hands so their analysts can focus on the important things. We keep baseball and hockey safe. And then in terms of companies that were built in the cloud, like Peloton and DoorDash, everyone knows better as a online financial services company and mortgage as well. And in those cases, they did very well, even with COVID last year. So they said, we can build our own 7/24 SOC, and it will take about 3 years and a minimum of $5 million, or we could hire Expel, to go ahead and do the work. So very quick in terms of what the workbench looks like. And again, toward metrics, this is the coffee report, dashboard. You could actually get metrics on investigations that are underway, what kicked them off, what the actions are, if there's incidents, what the remediation steps are as well. Talking about an incident, what you see is the who, what, where, when, why. So this is the findings report, when things show up, when it got there, 21 minutes from the time it popped up with an endpoint alert to remediation. You can see the timeline of what our analysts are doing and our bots are doing. You can see hosts that might be involved. So again, very big on dashboarding and statistics. In terms of the tech stack, again, you can look and see how your tech is performing. Again, we use best of class of whatever you choose as a customer and plug into those things and give you visibility into an average day in Palo, what the alerts are being used in investigations, where initial leads might have come from, and not as much, maybe more so on the endpoint. And then in terms of other areas, resilience, even if there's not active things, we help you disrupt the bad guys and help the good guys do their job better. make recommendations for resilience in very plain English reports that could be pulled off. If we're doing phishing, again, statistics, who's reporting, what are they reporting, what are the frequencies, what's good, what's bad, what's inconclusive, where are the main domains and threats coming from, and closing the loop with the end users. For those that follow the NIST framework, you could set your baselines here and follow kind of good to better to best and track things for your target. So again, measuring the efficiency of security programs and getting the numbers out of those. High level, you get alerts, see what's high, medium, low critical activity that's going on. And then let's say you want to evaluate a new technology. It's essentially as easy as plugging that new security tech. Let's say we'll take a carbon, we'll add that to the program, and that security input is now getting pulled into our SOC for management. So very high level on what Expel is about. If you like what you see, I handle all Michigan and Northern Ohio accounts of 1,000 employees and above. Devin is my counterpart for mid-market below 1,000. And Nick, who's actually on this call as well, works with us to set some things up. So I think at a high level, that's it. We do a lot of blogs, so resources that are out there that you could check out. We do things in Azure, in AWS, in GCP, a lot of things that you might find helpful to look at. So I put that as a list. We like to make it easy to share with the community, like Cloud Security Alliance and others. And if you've got questions, I'd welcome you to reach out, set up a call. We'll do a Zoom. And to Grant's point, face-to-face, I've got both vaccines, so happy to meet with anyone again. It's been inside way too long, but appreciate the opportunity to talk and looking forward to Richard's meeting and presentation today as well.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate kind of the topical theme on metrics and measurement, but great to see kind of the quick demo. Appreciate you getting through that. Thank you. Our sponsors obviously make these sessions possible. So if you're interested in kind of getting a hold of Jim and having a further conversation, please do. Thanks, Jim, again, to you and Expel for sponsoring. Okay. Mr. Syerson, I'm going to kick it to you now. I spoke a little bit this at the outside of the meeting. I'm really excited for this presentation. I've read the book that you see there, and I think there'll be an update come at the outset of the presentation, maybe on a to be released work as well. Again, if you don't follow Rich on LinkedIn, highly recommend it. Great content, very insightful. I'm going to shut up now, and Rich, please take over. And are you able to share?
Let's see. I think so. Can everybody see that? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Great.
Got it.
Great. So thank you again so much for allowing me to visit you remotely in Michigan. It's really, really nice to be here. For those of you who don't know, I'm here in California, sequestered away, but soon to also be able to get out. I've had my first shot and second one's coming. So I'm pretty excited to be able to be human again. So again, I'm Richard Syerson. I'm the co-founder of Soluble and their CISO. Prior to that, I was the CISO at Lending Club, Twilio, GE Healthcare, and sundry others. Along the way, I wrote a book called How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. Despite its long, gangly title and pea green cover, it's actually done quite well, which was shocking to me. It's curriculum for the Department of Defense CISO program. It's curriculum at Harvard, Brown, Berkeley, Carnegie Mellon, George Mason, a bunch of other schools. It's been curriculum for the Society of Actuaries exam as well. And the only reason I mention that is because this topic today is about measurement, really about metrics. And so this is a key topic that's been motivated in part by my first book and my experience as a CISO. I'm also in the process of authoring and actually delivering to my publisher a second book called the Metrics Manifesto, Confronting Security with Data. And the majority of the content you'll see today is much more aligned with that book. In fact, today our focus is going to be on measuring DevSecOps. Specifically, it's going to be on a framework and some technology that I put together that will be open source. So I'll talk more about that. And the framework is called BOOM for DevSecOps. BOOM is short for Baseline Objectives and optimization measures. And so I'll go into some detail there. Before we begin, as we go through this, you're going to probably be wondering, why does he or did he do all this? Well, first of all, necessity is the mother of all invention. Working in the salt mines of security for so long, particularly as a leader in Fortune level companies, measurement has been key. So necessity is the mother of all invention, and boredom is its father. And so those are my rationales and reasons for what you're about to see here. So let's start off by talking about DevSecOps context. I don't want to assume that everybody knows what DevSecOps is. And knowing security folks, I'm going to imagine that everyone has their own opinion, ranging from it's absolutely nothing to some very specific, very opinionated perspective on the topic. So let's talk about the traditional CISO. This is the sword of Damocles. You may be familiar with that. That's Damocles reclining there with the sword, which is held by a horse's hair from the ceiling, and he has the emperor standing over him. And Damocles had said to the emperor, "Your job's easy." And the emperor says, "Yeah, it looks easy. Here, this is what it's really like." And so he's there waiting for the sword to drop to kill him. So that's the traditional CISO. We have risks. Most of them, many of them we're aware of. Now listen, there's unknown unknowns. There's things that we don't know. And guess what? That's all the stuff you don't know about. But there are things that we do know, and we're aware of them. In fact, oftentimes there's hundreds of things that are looming, and we're not sure what's going to drop. But we have some sense of it. I mean, we have teams that have been trained. We have decades of experience, at least a couple typically, and we have technology that we're aware of. But things are changing. This is the cloud native CISO. He looks a little bit similar, he or she, but things are a little different. I'm going to argue that they have many more risks. Oftentimes, many of them are faster, and in some cases smaller, but still devastating. And the challenge is that these are knowable unknowns. So it's different, right? There's a lot more knowable unknowns for the CISO. And to give you an idea of what the future holds, and again, our goal is to make those knowable unknowns known. What's for the future? When I talk about DevSecOps, when I talk about the modern CISO, when I talk about modern security, when I talk about cloud native, here's an example of what this is like. Now, 5 years ago, I was with Twilio. We were doing 30,000 releases a year. I thought that was a big deal. Let's look at Spotify super quick, just to give you an idea of what I really mean by DevSecOps and why I think measurement is so critically important. They're doing roughly 20,000 deployments a day. All right, so just wrap your mind around that. Again, if you work in a traditional environment, you typically might be doing a release a quarter. Maybe you're super fast, you're doing a release a week. 20,000 deployments a day. It's 5 minutes to first build and deploy, meaning you show up, your first day, you're a developer, within 5 minutes, you can actually have code deployed. That means infrastructure, the works, instantiated, software running. The velocity and the volume, really the volumetric change is huge here. This is what's coming to everybody though. And I'm going to argue that this sort of velocity, which is coming, if you're going to compete in a modern world, you're going to be approaching this, invalidates a lot of what we do in terms of security. It invalidates a lot of enterprise solutions, and it invalidates in many ways a lot of practices. I'm going to argue that it puts security in a role much more of governance. And when I talk about governance, that really means governing what the heck's going on. And that means measurement. We're leaning into a world where measurement is going to be, I think, primary, particularly if you're a security leader, primary in your role in fighting the bad guy. All right, so that's a little bit of context. Now let's get into a little bit of definitions. Again, I don't want to assume that we all have the same thoughts about what DevSecOps is or what measurement is in particular. So what is the goal of measurement? At least for this talk. I think it's the goal in general, but for this talk, is to turn knowable unknowns, again, those things, all those swords you saw were Damocles when you had the blindfold on, turn all those knowable unknowns into known knowns so you can manage risk. Again, what is the goal of measurement? To turn knowable unknowns into known knowns so you can manage risk for this discussion, all right? So what is DevSecOps for this discussion? And I think there are gonna be a lot of people who maybe disagree with this, and that's fine. Again, this is for this discussion. It is security that is executed by developers in a cloud native context. So what is DevSecOps? It is security that is executed by developers in a cloud native context. If we observe evolution, if we observe what's happened with infrastructure, what we've seen is infrastructure has completely shifted left, meaning developers now are defining their container specs, they're defining ingresses, right? They are deploying directly to the cloud. We're seeing less traditional operational people, they're disappearing. And I'd argue that a lot of DevOps capability is shifting over to the developers. And if you think about the velocity and how fast things are going, you have to put those sorts of capabilities close to the point of value creation. Like this, it has to be right there. We've seen this in here we are in Detroit. You've seen this in just in time. You've seen this in the automotive industry. Really, the elimination of waste or quality was really the elimination of processes that were extraneous to the production of value. And we're seeing the same thing happen here as we're maturing the value creation of the manufacturing of software value. So this applies to security as well. All right, so so what we've talked about, right? I've talked about the context for the modern leader. I've talked about what DevSecOps is and the changes that are occurring. I've talked about, again, what is measurement in this context. So let's talk about the next thing that you need if you're gonna do metrics and measurement. You need telemetry. So we're gonna define DevSecOps telemetry. All right, so in the center here, we have this concept of DevSecOps. I'm gonna show some things here. This is not the totality. This is just some of the things. We have infrastructure as code. I talked about the shift left of infrastructure. That's really what DevOps has happened, and it's happening even more. So we're seeing infrastructure as code, Docker, Terraform, Kubernetes, et cetera, right? Where you're actually writing code, or really YAML, right, in the form of JSON, to define infrastructure in development prior to it getting pushed out, right? We have images, right? We have secrets management, Trufflehog, detect secrets. We have DAST, we have IAST, we have fuzzing, we have SAST, we have SCA, bunches of other stuff, right? But this is the idea here. You have lots of DevSecOps capabilities, not the totality, and those are going to create telemetry or data, right? And it's going to be typically got at inside of development in real time, right? Through integrating directly with your CI/CD, with your repos in this case, and you're going to be sending that data to some sort of solutions for doing measurement. Again, this is a security measurement. Typically, we're talking about data science, or a fancier word, predictive analytics, probabilistic programming, all those sorts of things. I happen to favor R, by the way, just because I'm lazy and I like R. Python's great. We have a Texas Instrument calculator circa late 1970s, early 80s, and of course the Abacus. But the idea of measurement is you're going to be getting telemetry, real-time telemetry. Again, think back to Spotify, 20,000 releases a day. You're going to be getting that telemetry, and you're going to be doing high-volume data science on this. So this is where we're going with this. All right. So let's lean into DevSecOps metrics. I know it sounds complex already, but there is some good news to be had here in terms of simplicity. First of all, there's only two major classes of measures. Again, metrics here, below metrics, you have measures. Below measures, you have statistics. But anyways, measures. There's only two types of measures, at least for the sake of this discussion. You have hits. You can say, this is 1A, 1B. You have hits, and you have misses, or hits and misses. Most security is made of hit and miss events, right? That's what we do in security. The other sort of measure is really time to live. By the way, this character right here is from the Black Plague. This is a plague doctor. Epidemiology and survival analysis and things like that, things that are so critically important to security, yet not used, comes from people who used to walk around like this. Pretty scary, right? All right, so let's talk about the fundamental data. We have two, again, we talked about two things. We have hits and misses, and we have really time to live or survival analysis. We have fundamental data. You have the event. An event looks like this. You saw a thing, an angry packet hit a firewall, whatever. It's an event. Something happened. Then you have processes. What are processes? They have a first scene and they have a last scene. This is it. This is metrics data. Now we can go home, right? This is all of it. So what are some scene events? You saw a login event. You saw a vulnerability materialize. You saw phishing, etc. So you saw a thing. We're not talking about a process at this point in time. We're talking about events. Oftentimes we do a lot of counting of events. We bucket events. Processes, you have a myriad of processes within CI/CD, within DevSecOps to measure, right? Where you have a first scene or the start of something and the end of something. You might have a whole long list of things like MITRE ATT&CK where you have many start, stop processes. But these are your two things and your two fundamental data types. Maybe this is old news or to you. Maybe you already get this. I think for some people, this could be enlightening and simplifying. All right, so let's talk about fundamental data within DevSecOps. What might be seen? So if we're talking about Spotify, for example, they have, I think, 500 squads, as I understand it. A squad is typically consists of a 2-pizza team, right? So you have 8 to 12 people. They get larger, they subdivide. So roughly 500 teams, as I understand it. So do the math, 5,000 developers, give or take. And they typically are bucketed into product groups. And oftentimes these teams or groups are associated with repositories. This is just how things tend to get managed. You can have mono repos. You're not going to have it at a larger enterprise organization. And so they're going to have a lot of first scene, last scene events. Again, if you think back to the telemetry I showed you, where you have something that materializes and then it goes away because it's remediated or invalidated, you have a lot of events. So what do we do? And again, you're going to be probably collecting this data, in this case, directly from a repo through some sort of scan, what have you. So what are we going to do now? We want to start measuring burn down. In this case, I'm going to talk about one specific type of metric, and I'll get to where it fits in within Boom. We're going to talk about burning down DevSecOps risk, right? That materializes, all right, in a large environment where you're talking about hypervelocity, right? So you'll have a team. You have team one. So team one is a squad of 8 to 12-person team. This is their hit and miss events. What is a hit and a miss? The total events are the amount of vulnerabilities that show up, right? And the hit is the remediation. It was eliminated in a quarter. So you had whatever 97 plus 23 is. That's what 120, right? So they in a whole quarter they eliminated 23 things that materialized in terms of that telemetry. 97 remained, right? So that's team one. Let's call this a product team, right? This is a product team consisted of 15 squads. This is not unusual. And if you were to measure their data, it would end up looking something like this. This is a distribution. And why do we measure this way? Well, when we're doing measurement, particularly when we're getting into data science, and particularly when we're measuring risk, we're going to always want to retain our uncertainty. The reality is we don't know what the actual true rate is. The rate's, again, it's over time, it's fluctuating. It's always growing, right? Eventually, when you baseline over time, when you have enough data, you have a lot of data, that rate stabilizes, right? Like a batting average. Once you've been at bat for 10 years, we've got a pretty good idea of what your batting average is. Probably starts to decline over time a little bit, but the hits and misses don't make the overall rate change. We don't have a whole lot of data here. These two lines represent a fancy term called the highest density interval. Again, statisticians like to create intellectual prophylactics to keep commenters out. All this means is, hey, if you're gonna make a bet about where the rate is, you can be pretty darn sure it's gonna be between these two values. But that's still a lot of uncertainty, 7% to 32%. If we were to make a bet, we'd bet somewhere around here that you know this team of 15 squads has a rate in Q1 roughly around 18% burn down. That's pretty inefficient. Particularly if it's critical risk, you would say that they are hyper inefficient. They're creating a lot of risk and not cleaning it up. So let's fast forward to Q4 now. Same teams, and in this case, we're seeing a change. They got better, let's say, over time. And in Q4, they're much more efficient. They're producing more. They are producing more vulnerabilities, but they're remediating a lot more. I don't want to say they're good, better, and different. I just say that the rate has gotten better. And because we have more data, by the way, we have a lot less uncertainty. Notice this is roughly what, a 13% spread, where we had what, a 25% spread before. So with more data, you have more data, you're less uncertain. So I just want to stop and say, this is how, in terms of modern measurement, in terms of modern and DevSecOps, this is the type of approach we would want to be taking. This is really, for those of you who are into statistics, this is a Bayesian approach. It's a beta binomial for those of you who like the fancy prophylactics that keep the commoners out. But the reality is, this is how we want to measure. We want to retain our uncertainty without obscuring our certainty. And we want to have auditable data as well. So we have hits and misses. All right, let's continue on. So hit and misses for all groups. So in this case, let's say this is product team B. This has 15 or 20 Scrum teams. And let's say this has 15 or 20, this is product team B, 15 or 20 Scrum teams. And we can look at their rates over quarter. And we can start sending KPIs against this. Again, baseline objectives, KPI can be objectives, and optimization measures. We'll talk about optimization shortly, but we're baselining rates. We're not just doing mere counts, like what we saw in the previous presentations, great metrics. Those are count-based metrics. You'll see that's a key part of Boom as well. But we need to get into rates and trends and time series and longitudinal analysis, whatnot. There's no other way for us to know whether or not we're getting better unless we're trending the data, understanding the volume of risk that's coming on, the volume of risk that's leaving, and our efficiencies. And we need to set goals against those. So what do we see right here? We see that in Q4 for product team B, it looks like they met their KPI, but the reality is they've 60% met their KPI. We would say that they actually haven't officially fully made it, right? There's uncertainty. We don't have, for Q4, we don't have a whole lot of data. We have some data, and we would say it seems like they're meeting-ish it. It looks like they, in terms of Q3, they certainly didn't meet their KPI. In fact, there's a lot of uncertainty and not a lot of data. So again, this is a great example of us wanting to make sure that we retain our uncertainty without diluting our certainty. We're measuring reality. We're being very truthy about the data, completely auditable. And again, taking a very DevSecOps oriented approach where we're looking at teams and their squads and measuring data over time. So we've talked about DevSecOps. We've talked about hit and miss models, right? That was the example of hit and miss data. It's really simple. Again, hit and miss data, you only need 2 columns to do what I just did. 2 columns of data. First scene, last scene. Every single one of the tools that you run have a first scene, a last scene. All your traditional vulnerability management, all of your SAST, all your DAST, by the way, all of your malware analysis, your firewalls, things like that. A lot of them. Sometimes you only have hits. That's great. We have plenty of measurements for hits, but you all have hit and miss data. Now we're switching to survival analysis. If you are into MITRE, I think someone mentioned MITRE earlier, you've heard of dwell time, which came from Lockheed Martin. Listen, there's engineering failure analysis, there's survival analysis, there's time to live, there's a myriad of terms for it. But the reality is it all kind of boils down to this thing you're seeing here, which is called a life table. A life table is about a 500-year-old object that's still used today extensively in actuarial science, right? And it's used extensively in epidemiology. It was actually invented by a gentleman by the name of Grant, who by trade was a haberdasher. What is a haberdasher? They are people who are in the business of vending things like lace and various sorts of ribbons and hats and whatnot. He happened to be an amateur, amateur, amore, love numbers, and he was very curious about mortality rates, as was everybody at that time in London. Plague still tended to, it would come and go. And there was a weekly magazine that came out that listed deaths. It's very morbid, I get it, but he actually took 70 years of this data and accumulated it. He was the first big data scientist. And he was the first one that was able to do something like this. This is something that evaded even the Royal Society that was run by the aristocracy, right? He invented this way of measuring that actually looked at cumulative change over time. Believe it or not, that was not something they did 450, 500 years ago until this guy arrived, until the haberdasher showed up, right? The amateur showed up. He was uneducated. He was not an aristocrat. The king saw this, saw that it actually produced valuable measures, and he put this haberdasher actually into the Royal Society to the chagrin of all the other smart and wealthy rich people. King died, he got kicked out. But anyways, here we are. This is the fundamental object that security needs to use and largely doesn't. It's how you do, actually how you really do dwell time. It's how you really do mean time to fix, right? And all those other things. This is it. What does it look like? This is survival analysis. It allows you to start answering really interesting questions. Like, for example, in this case, it looks like it's 50% of vulnerabilities are for test group 2. That's team 2, which has, in this case, 20 or 30 Scrum teams, roughly several hundred developers. 50% of critical vulnerabilities are eliminated in roughly 80 days or more, right? Things like that. And you can actually slice and dice to 25, 50, 80, 10%, whatever. But now you can start setting KPIs against these things. Again, and it ends up being auditable data. This is not done by security, not in this way, not using survival analysis and not used to make forecasts. So again, very simple data. All you're using is first scene, last scene for any sort of data generating process that you have interest in. So I'm going to move forward now. Again, I want to just recap what I talked about. I talked about the legacy CISO. I talked about the modern CISO. I talked about the fact that we're going to be confronting, or you already are confronting, things like what Spotify has. I did at Twilio, but not at the level what Spotify has. It's coming to all of you soon. Because of that, we are not going to be able to keep up with traditional means. Therefore, we are going to use new ways of measuring. We are going to be more in a role of accountability, right? And so we need methodologies that keep pace. I showed you that there's really only two fundamental measures, and metrics over measures, two measures: hit and miss models, which really breaks down to hits and hit and miss, and survival analysis, or basically first seen, last seen. Very simple. I show you some examples of how that works. And I gave you a little history as well, particularly in survival analysis, because I like the story of Mr. Grunt. All right, now we're going to talk about BOOM. BOOM is short for baseline objectives and optimization measurements. This is the proposition. You have to baseline your data generating processes. That means you're having ratios and you're measuring them and their change over time. There is no other way within the sciences to measure a process. If you're doing mere counts, that's good, but that's just like salt. You need other things in your ingredients, all right? Objective. We are operational people. You have to set goals for your capabilities. If someone says, well, what is my goal? Your goal should be better, definitely not worse. Let's just start there. I want to have my processes get better. Why? Because your companies are, if they're successful, are in the business of continuously exposing more value to more people through more channels. If you are in a successful business, that's what they do. They are going to, like Spotify, making more. What do bad guys do? Exploit more. You're sitting in the middle, your security, you have more here, you have more here. And if you're wondering what you do, here's your answer: more. You do better. Always. Good. Optimization. So baseline objectives, KPIs, do better. Optimization is a way of measuring, so you can start looking at what are the capabilities or sub-capabilities within a process that are accounting for the most change. For example, what is the thing within vulnerability management, let's say, or application security? What is the thing of the various capabilities that's having the largest impact in helping me achieve my goals? What is accounting for the most velocity in terms of achieving my goals? That's optimization measures. All right, glad we're clear on that. So BOOM for security: baseline objectives, optimization measurements. Love this quote. Measurement is fabulous unless you're busy measuring what is easy as opposed to what's important. Seth Godin, great quote. So what is BOOM? BOOM consists of this: basic counts, like we saw with the other presentation. You have to count things. That's the fundamental data we all have. Burn down rates. I showed an example of burn down rates, right? That's again, it's just a ratio, right? You have the things that you're fixing over the total, right? And then you're measuring that over time and be able to measure change and set goals against that. We have arrival rates and departure rates. You may not have a process. You may not be measuring a process. Well, what are our processes? Again, a process is where you have a first scene, a last scene. You have 2 dates, right? Again, you can have a macro process that has many processes, but sometimes you don't have that second value. All you have is angry packet, or vulnerability materialized, or malware materialized, or phishing materialized, or login, something with identity access, deprovisioning, provision. You see some event, and you want to measure the rate with which those events materialize and the rate with which they dematerialize. If your job is to control toxic processes, you would want to be measuring the rates at which things materialize. So again, basic counts, burn down rates, arrival and departure rates. Survival analysis. We already talked about survival analysis. It's ancient, right? It's great. It's the most important measurement security should be doing and doesn't do. Not really. And we have escape rates. I'll talk more about escape rates. You may have heard about that before. If you were to Google escape rates, you would see some kind of waterfall-y stuff from maybe, and then some DevSecOps stuff. Escape rates comes from the natural sciences, kind of physics, Brownian motion. If you've ever heard of Brownian motion, if you haven't heard about it, look it up. Escape rate, it has to do with the permeability of barriers and the rate with which tiny little particles move through those barriers. I know it sounds really fancy. In our case, it's the rate with which risk moves from one contained space to typically a space of less control. So for example, a vulnerability that moves from development to production, or from inside to outside, north, south, east, west. You want to, as you get mature, you want to be able to measure these rates because you as a control owner are looking to control the rate with which toxicity moves, particularly from a state of more control to less control. This is Boom. I'd like to say I created Boom. I didn't. I just observed what other people do in terms of measurement, and I came up with a fancy name for it. I knew that we have to baseline. I know that we need to set objectives, and I know that we need to measure for optimization. And I know I needed to constrain the problem set to a relatively simple set of measures. So here they are. All right, so let's just talk about escape rates, just to really hammer home what we're talking about. Escape rates is a form of hit and miss model. So you may have a number of vulnerabilities that are seen in stage. You have a variety of DevSecOps tools, like that whole thing I showed earlier on, and you're scanning away and seeing things, right? Be it AppSec, DevSecOps, whatever, it's all kind of becoming one. And you see a bunch of stuff. You see things that get fixed in development, and you see things that didn't get fixed, right? And two of the ones that, and these are all the things that actually produced, right? That went from a branch into main and made their way out into production, right? They're now floating around in the real world. You create a ratio of this. And again, here's that famous curve we have. We have a lot of uncertainty. We have a very, very small amount of data. So we really don't know what the true escape rate is, right? This is just for January escapes for one Scrum team, for critical risk, externally facing, let's say. So a 25% escape rate with lots of uncertainty. Could be as low as 7%, could be high as whatever that is, 60%. We're highly uncertain. All right, now we have 2 months of data. This is cumulative data. These are hits and misses. They're accumulating over time. And this is a Bayesian method, by the way, but you're adding it together. Really simple. Now we see a lot more data, right? We've seen stage and production, and now it looks like it's closer to a 29% escape rate, roughly 3%. And you're seeing, by the way, you see how that thing's getting squishier, it's getting taller, it's getting denser. That's a function of having more data. We have more data, but we're still uncertain. We're still baselining what's going on. Again, baseline, objectives, optimization, measures. Okay? And for Q3, for one small Scrum team of 8 to 12 people, critical risks coming from all that DevSecOps stuff, this is what we see. We could say the baseline seems to be getting fairly stable. It's 19%, give or take a few percentage. That's roughly their rate, right? Now we can go about and asking questions like, is that good? Is that bad? Well, what I'd say is it needs to get better, right? We should be always orienting towards better. Why? Because your companies are in the business of always exposing more value to more people through more channels at higher velocity. That is if you're in a successful company. If you're not a successful company, then maybe you don't have to worry about it. But if you're in a successful company, they are getting better. They are in the business to expose more value to more people to make more money. Bad guys are in the business of exposing that faster. So your job is to at least scale, meaning keep parity and or improve. All right, so here's some code that does just this. What I put this here, because all this sort of stuff is going to be in my book. It'll be up in GitHub. You can download it and you'll have availability to it. I am no longer a developer by trade. I've been a CISO for a long time. I still code practically every day, a little bit of something, typically data science stuff. But so please, don't hate the player, hate the game. But it all works, right? So you can start doing things like setting goals and measuring and whatnot. I'm going to show you how I'm rolling this all into a dashboard, so you don't have to get all fiddly with it. But escape rates is a DevSecOps metrics. We use rate as a policy to beat for this extreme vulns, P0s, P1s, P2s. We can score the strength of the relationship between capabilities and rates, which I'll show you in a moment. Optimization is doubling down on relationships that matter and eliminating those that don't. We're going to talk about what that looks like. So let's talk about this. Here's some escape rates for a bunch of teams. This is 50 teams, and this is across several years of data. The teams that have, they kind of look like TIE fighters, right? So the teams that are really wide, by the way, like this, that just means we don't have a lot of data, right? We have little data. Here's a team where we have a lot of data, 1,600 in total for team 30. Wow, we've got lots of data, so we have a little bit of uncertainty. These lines represent progressive KPIs. This is the current one, expected, right? And then this is stretch and goal. Again, we're always orienting ourselves towards baseline objectives. Now, what have I done here that's really interesting, by the way? You could have a team that starts out on day one. Again, like Spotify, remember, 5 minutes. 5 minutes to be releasing into production. From just showing up, getting your coffee, going to the bathroom, sitting down at your desk, your first day, boom, you're out there. Well, just like we don't know much about a baseball player whose first day is to bat, we may not know a lot about a Scrum team or a product team that's only been around for a month or two. We don't have a lot of data. We can have them inherit the aggregate data from the rest of the teams, or from teams that have been, let's say, we're going to let them inherit the aggregate data from teams that have been around for at least a year or more. There's an official method for this. It's called empirical Bayes. It's a fancy term, again, intellectual prophylactic to keep us commoners out. But it's a way to say like, hey, this batter, I'm not going to, he or she does not hit 1,000. He or she does not hit 0, right? They probably hit somewhere around the average, which I think is a 271% average, I believe, right? 271, 272. I'm going to bet there's somewhere around there. I'm highly uncertain, right? I'm very uncertain, don't have a lot of data, but I'm going to start them off here so I can start measuring and understanding. This is a standard way to go out doing things. So with all this data, that's what we did. We started out with giving them, for those teams that are relatively new, that have a low data count, like this case, like 50, right? There's only 50 total for team 36. They actually inherited the overall organizational average. So a scrum team is like a ball player. They can inherit the league average. The more data, the more certainty, less spread. The true vuln rate is 95% likely to be within each band. This is a credible interval, not a confidence interval. Oftentimes you'll hear people say things like this for confidence intervals. That's actually wrong. That's not how that works. But it is how it works for a credible interval, which is Bayesian. Sorry, just nerd talk there for those of you who appreciate that stuff. We can set KPIs, which can be points, just like the colored lines. All right, that's a lot of theory. That's a lot of stuff. And I want you to notice two things. We have not strayed from the date for hits and hits and misses, right? Dates, that's again an event, which is just one timestamp, or a process, which is a beginning timestamp and an end timestamp. All of that measurement is based on that. All of your tools produce data like that by default. And all of your tools have APIs for consuming data like that, or you can get it from an Excel spreadsheet. Everything. There is not a thing that doesn't have this. Maybe 20 years ago, but not now. So you actually have all this data. All right. So now we're going to start talking about baking solutions, because I know you're probably have a headache from all the data sciencey sort of stuff. So let's take it up a level. So this is stuff that's from the book. How do we go about thinking about metrics? So I think there's a tendency sometimes with CISOs, with leaders, to think, okay, I got to go measure everything. I got to get metrics in place for everything. I'm going to argue that no, because you're not going to be able to do that. It's not going to happen for you. You're never going to be able to do it. You want to be able to measure the hot spots, the things that you really care about. What are those things? Oftentimes things that you end up reporting eventually to the board, right? You want to measure those things, and you want to allow teams or sub-teams to be able to measure those things as well, the things that are important. You have to have some way to think about these things, kind of a hierarchy, or in this case is a taxonomy. So you want to think about capabilities, right? So capabilities are a subset of things coming from your information security management system. Things are coming from NIST, CSF, what have you. Threat management, vulnerability management, identity access management, other. And under a capability is composed of people, process, technology. We're going to be looking at the processes. Again, remember, first start, typically it's timestamps, right? First timestamp, last timestamp. We're looking for processes. What's a process? A data generating process. It's really where the work happens. So in this case, we're in burn down, we're talking about measuring the remediation process. What's the metric? It's a burn down rate. And what's it consist of? Measures hit and miss models and time to live. There's another row down here that you don't see that's really called statistics. And there's just tons of statistical models. I didn't think I needed to, blur your minds with, there's just so many choices there. But this is how we go about thinking about how we go about measuring. We have a hierarchy of things. Again, this will all be in the book. So I've actually built some tools around this, and these will be available in the book on the eventual website that's coming up, where you can actually download this, and it'll be complete instructions. Again, be gentle, because I'm CISO by trade, was a developer a long time ago, but I wanted to give back, and I wanted to give you something where you can go play with. I kind of have this hope that the Boom framework and this sort of tool will be something that people can build on, and we could, I don't know if we call it a huddle around or build a community around. But the reality is it should be easy to start stamping things out, because again, at the back end, we're just talking about 1 or 2 columns of data, always. 1 or 2 columns of data, always. And that's what you see here. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to challenge the gods of demos, and I'm actually going to fire up and show you I'm going to show you what this looks like for real. And I hope that it doesn't break. I hope that it actually works. So let's see here. There you go. So I had it backed up just in case on the PowerPoint, because the moment you try to demo something, it ends up failing. So I set this up for now so that you can go and you can bring data in. It accepts either a single column or 2 column, and then n metadata that you might like in terms of risks and other values. So very simple to start out with. In the book, I might actually add some RESTful APIs as well for fun. But I expect if this is going to be an open source project, it's the kind of thing that people can play with. Again, this is not a pay thing. This is a fun thing. So what do we have here? These right here are what I call metrics objects. And they're a quick and dirty way to really understand what's going on with the process. So in this case, we have critical vulnerability burn down. Currently, you're running at a 64% burn down rate. It's a 21% decrease from the last period, right? So you can see that here, 2 weeks ago, 85%, 4 weeks ago, 100%. And then you have a goal, which is a KPI. And I'm going to explain that shortly. Again, the idea is baseline objectives, right? So you have KPIs here. You can actually set KPIs and it changes dynamically. You'll see that right here. It changes whatnot. So what we're looking to do, though, is say, OK, how do I want to measure my progress? You can measure by rate of change. The default is rate of change. But you might want to measure based on KPI, right? You're more concerned with how well am I doing in relationship to a KPI. So in this case, you have 75% KPI, 0% met. Now, I don't want to bore you with extreme data science here, but there's a particular method that's being used here that actually looks at the uncertainty of the data. And it looks at the amount of totality of data you have over time and is able to measure to what extent or the strength with which you're actually meeting your KPI. So it doesn't just look at an average. Remember back to that image I had with the 2 teams and the 4 different multicolored distributions? It's really an example of that where you're looking at that distribution and how much have you made it past that KPI line. So it's a way of measuring really how effectively are you actually meeting or beating a KPI? It has a dual purpose, though. It also allows you to track more effectively, are you slipping? While you might have met a KPI, are you slipping? So in this case, so this is the KPI mode. And then there's a mixed mode, which is a really conservative mode, which takes into consideration both the KPI that you've set, as well as the rate of actual data change. And the only way for you to actually be green is if you're scaling in terms of rate change. What I mean by scaling, meaning there's no real deficiency in terms of your burn down rate over time. And you are also meeting or approximately meeting within 95% of your KPI, right? So it's a pretty conservative way of measuring whether or not you're meeting goals or not. So again, this is an example of one module for measuring vulnerability burn down. The reality is you could have hundreds of processes that you're going to measure like this. In this case, by the way, in terms of boom metrics, this brings in both critical, the burn down ratio that has actually time to live right here. This is just mere counts. And then in this case, this is actually survival analysis as well that's being measured. It also includes the ability to go and do business intelligence and look at your data and more thoroughly see where you are in terms of burn up and burn down. And I'm almost done because I know this is a lot.
Hey, Richard, a quick question came in while you're transitioning.
Sure.
How you're injecting AI in measuring the KPIs. I know you had your last view there had like a forecast kind of a view. So do you structured learning or like how, are you using AL, ML?
No. Okay. It's predictive analytics. So Bayesian methods. So survival analysis, regression, Bayesian regression, multilinear hierarchical analysis. So it's all, there's no artificial intelligence here. This is all facts and the real deal. Yeah. And again, my view is you don't need to know that. I mean, you can, if you want to, you can go and learn that stuff. Yeah. My assumption is you're an operational leader and you have stuff you need to get done. And you want to know, again, you're at Spotify, you're a global company, and you want to know whether or not you're keeping up or not. You want to know within a week or two, based on the current data, are you going to be veering off of your KPI? And you want to be able to use methods that are relatively conservative that let you know that. You want to be able to take into consideration your uncertainty. I'm going to go really fast through these because I actually just did the demo for you. That was in R, by the way, R Shiny. All that's going to be available, again, through GitHub with complete instructions in the book for you to be able to do this stuff on your own. And I'm just giving that away because, why not, right? We all want good stuff. So the infrastructure I'm putting together, it's just a single node and kind of microservice with a bunch of Docker containers. So real lightweight, meaning you can do this for free in AWS. So I want it to be free, open source, get going. And you could go ahead and build, you could build a complete scalable enterprise process with this. You could just give it out to separate teams as well easily enough. So yeah, and so the first module is live and works. It's already in AWS, but when the book publishes, I'll officially release it out there into the public. So yeah, end notes real quick. My new book's coming out shortly. Under the threat of death and firing squad, Wiley said, hey, you need to get this to us now. Listen, you do a startup at the same time you get an advance from a publisher, startup wins, but the book's ready to go. So it'll be out and you'll have all the stuff and you'll be able to play with it. Also, if you're interested, I guess I was told I can do one small free shameless plug. I am a co-founder of Soluble. We are call it a DevSecOps company, and we make it super duper easy to secure your infrastructure as code and development. And by the way, it's all free for now. We have a very, very generous free tier, which will persist for a long time, I guess forever. But yeah, it's easy. I've actually had a number of CISOs try this out. We actually provide some free Terraform for you to test that's really vulnerable. And I've had a number of CISOs who don't code and don't really know how to spell DevSecOps, use it and be successful. I would love nothing more, since this is free, I would love nothing more for you folks to go to our site and try it. I'd actually have a whole video up there. So I'd love for you to check it out. But in summary, this is it. I've created a framework called Boom. It's that predicated on the idea that you should be baselining your processes, which has changed over time. You should be setting goals, objectives. I think you likely already do that. Those goals, those objectives should be as truthful as possible given the data, and as it changes over time. It should retain your uncertainty without obscuring your certainty. You should be using optimization to look at the subset capabilities that are driving the velocity of change and be able to amplify those, again, using data. And you shouldn't have to think too much about this. I gave you a pop under the hood because that's what I do, but I'm giving away a whole set of free technology that you can use freely that'll be available with the book. And my encouragement, or my ask would be for those of you who are somewhat codey and nerdy to participate and help make it better, because I think this is something that's super needful for security and everyone should be measuring. With that, yeah, I know it was a lot, but I told you, necessity is the mother of invention and boredom is its father. And this is what I've done. This is what I do.
This is terrific stuff. We have some questions, Richard, I was going to kind of go through.
Sure.
First, your recommendations on measuring the rate of change, linear regression, moving average slope, something else like is there a way that you would recommend someone that's just kind of maybe starting to get into this looks at that question? Yeah.
So you want to measure, you don't need to do all the regression, all that fancy stuff. So you would, just do cumulative over time. So burn down rates. Let's just use that for example. So month one, you have 100. Let's say 100 vulnerabilities are found in month one. Again, you're starting at 0, right? You find 100, and in that time frame, let's say 50 of them disappear for whatever reason. They're remediated, whatnot. So you have 50 over 100. We know what that is, right? And then next month, cumulative, you add more. Let's say you have another 100 events. In this case, only 30. So now you have 80 over 200, right? And then you have another month, whatnot. So now you're starting to get over time a cumulative rate over time. And then you can measure the delta between those rates as well. And again, using the methodologies that I have, you had the uncertainty, because again, uncertainty is a function of how much data. That's how I would start. I mean, I believe that's how, a real rudimentary way to start measuring this. And that's how I would do it. The book gets into some more advanced stuff, longitudinal analysis and time series and things like that. And obviously survival analysis, which you saw there as well.
Another question that I think is might actually be a trick question to me. I'm curious, but any good references to start defining baseline objectives? So I guess I would even add my own spin to this question at the end to say, is that how it works for you, or do you just need to start and use the data you have to get to the objectives?
Yeah, you need a baseline first, right? You're going to have some processes that are important to you right now. Listen, there's 101 things that we're going to want to measure at any one given time. I get that. But there's going to be something that for whatever reason you have to measure. Maybe it's something to do with phishing. Maybe it's vulnerability management. Maybe it's a subset thereof. There's going to be something, and you need to know what that rate is. You want to know what that rate is over time. And the real question is that rate getting better? Is it optimizing? Is it scaling, means it's staying the same, even though there's more risk coming on board? Is your rate holding, or are you descaling? You should be able to say that, like, okay, is it changing? We're not talking about causality yet. We don't know the reason why. We haven't gotten into that, but we want to be able to know, how is it changing over time? And then we have to ask ourselves, well, is that good enough? The reality is, if you think about like a Spotify, everything that they've done is about an investment in scale and optimization with the goal of making it faster. I read an article, it was like, I think it was 4 years ago, they were at 14 days to onboard. Now they're down to 5 minutes. And I'm going to tell you, I'm sure they're optimizing for faster, right? That's just what you do. So this is important for us because our businesses are doing that. They are about doing that. That's what they do. And the bad guys are about doing that at the other end, and you're in the middle. So the question is, you need to know your rate. And then the question is, you want to at least be scaling. If you're scaling at a 40% efficiency rate for burn down for critical, remotely exploitable vulnerabilities, you have to ask yourself, well, is that good enough? The answer is no, by the way. So there's the answer to your question. But then you need to be setting KPIs to get better. And then that's where you start looking at investments, right, in people, process, technology to achieve those goals.
And then another question came in about tying this to kind of business objectives. How do you aggregate, or do you look at that with what you're doing? So if you have kind of that burn down rate picture over teams and over the population, are you able to tie that to different kind of business metrics, or kind of simplify the message, if you will, as it kind of goes up to a board or an executive class? Like, how do you respond, I guess, to that question? Is that a false premise, or like, how do you look at that?
I'm going to make a guess at what the person's asking, and they can tell us if I'm wrong. The question is, like, for the board, would I present this level of operational data to the board? Only if, for some odd reason, they wanted to know about a very specific, capability performance. If there was some question, of course I would. But typically, let's just take NIST CSF, for example, right? This is a lot of stuff I shared today would fall largely under protect, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, protect. And so you have, again, if you remember that hierarchy, the ontology I shared, information security management system, your CSF is up there, right? You have protect, and then protect is you can call it it's a function. They call it a function. That function is composed of capabilities, vulnerability management being one of the capabilities. And then that capability is full of processes, people, process, technology processes, or what I call data generating processes. So you could have a number of metrics that you're using to determine whether or not, from a CSF perspective, because again, you may say, all right, we're in this CSF, and protect for this BU or across the whole enterprise, but based on the nature of our business, protect should be, it has tiers, right? There's 4 tiers, right? We're here, this tier 2, we should be at tier N. What we see at tier 2 is our data generating processes that we care about are giving us these metrics. What we would see occurring, and this is a matter of, to a certain extent, of you choosing, what would you see occurring specifically that would give us the idea that and CSF allows you to, you decide this, right? You're going to get audited on what you've documented and chosen, right? We believe that to be at a tier we believe our capabilities should be, not only should they be scaling, but they should be optimizing at a certain rate towards these goals and achieving these goals. And that's where I would be. And so what would I say is, have we met that tier, right, for protect? Where are we deficient? And whatnot. I mean, that's kind of how I would think about it. Again, if I were to get into a board conversation, I don't think I would ever get that level, by the way. I never have. And I've done a lot of board presentations. Audit committee might come back afterwards. Guy or gal runs audit committee might say, hey, let's hang out and have coffee. And I'm going to, we're going to dive deep on how you're measuring and thinking about things. And guess what? You're going to have auditable, empirical, mathematically unambiguous data that is impossible to argue against. They may say not good enough, but at least they're not going to say that's bullshit, because it's not bullshit. It's
right.
It's measurement. Totally.
So you talked a lot about data science here, and you had some, Bayesian curves and different statistical concepts. How important to you is at least a remedial data science knowledge base for the type of cybersecurity professionals that are like students here, or kind of younger folks experience-wise kind of in the workforce? Like, How important will that be in your opinion?
I am awful at math, but I'm really good at following recipes. I'm very good at typing. I'm super good at copying and pasting. And I do read a lot, and I do like concepts. So the most important thing, if you read our first book, is this concept, object, and methods of measurement. Concept measurement is by far the most important thing, much more important than knowing how to wrangle data science. And what's the main concept of measurement? I'll summarize it in this: is retain your uncertainty without obscuring your certainty. And it's a bit of a Zen koan, but it's very important. You want to retain your uncertainty. Listen, all the stuff I showed, I'm trying not to lie. That's what I'm trying not to lie at the data, right? That's the thing. And so you want to retain your uncertainty without obscuring your certainty. What's an example of obscuring your certainty? A heat map. We go and we say, I don't know, feels red. That part feels maroon. I'll do that. By the way, I'm okay with heat. Although I like to say die heat map die. Those of you who follow me know I say that. I'm okay with heat map as long as you can tell me why. What's number one? What's number two? What's number three? And why? If you can do that, then I'm okay with the heat map. You can do whatever sort of risk artistry you like. You can create a Van Gogh. That's fine as long as you're able to tell what's number one, number two, number three, and why you're investing in the things that you're doing to bring down your risk. You can go ahead and create lots of art.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to kind of move on. That was outstanding. That was a lot of action. So thank you.
Sure.
A quick plug for our group. If you are not part of the LinkedIn group, please join. You see the link there. We would love to have you. Register your feedback. Send us any messages. Just in general, please join and kind of become a part of our community. The Gleaners Food Bank is kind of an ongoing thing that we've done in our sessions. You see the link below. This is a link in particular that is kind of sourced back to our group. We're very proud of the money that we've raised to date. So please, if you are able and willing, visit the link that you see here. We can kind of distribute it afterwards also in email if that's helpful. Obviously a great time of need with COVID for a lot of folks out there. Last thing, here we go. Our Amazon $25 gift certificate. We have 2 students, and I'm probably going to butcher your names, so apologies in advance. Akash Ahuja and Brendan Kacic. You are our lucky winners. You will get an email with all of the details, but $25 gift certificate coming. And outside of the student community, we have 5 other folks: Luke Voldal, Brian Hallman, Brian Gaughan. I don't know. We may need to take Brian Gaughan off that list. He knows one of the board members, so I'm not sure if that can stand. But Brian,
I don't know who you are, Grant.
Yeah, we'll see about yours. Denise Browning, Rebecca Mossman. So you all would each get emails as well with your AW or Amazon gift certificate. Past that, you see the slide here for CPE credits for Renew. Please send her a note if you would like to officially register for that CPE credit. I think Chris Burrows, I think I'm stealing your material now, potentially here. Any kind of closing remarks you have from your end?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I'm used to you stealing the show, but you did a great job hosting it today. So thanks for that. I just wanted to thank Richard for the presentation. Definitely keeping it simple, using the data. Kind of reminded me of the movie Moneyball, right? Make it simple. What's the number? The number is, 364 on base percentage. That's what you're shooting for. So you identified getting a baseline, setting objectives, and getting better. And that's kind of like the premise of the movie. So just definitely wanted to thank you. I learned a bit about this. I know as CISOs, we all, as any InfoSec person, we're always looking to better present what we do, better market our material, and better define it and support it with data. So closing out, great job. And hopefully the people that joined today saw some benefit. I think we can all take a little takeaway back to our own companies and better represent the positive work and the continuous improvement, the journey that we're all on together. So thank you all for joining. Have a great month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.